This week on the Powell Not Found podcast, Gerrit Cole is confirmed to have Tommy John surgery. He's gone under the knife. He's done the surgery. He is going to be out until 2026. Also, no more ballpark in Tampa. The Tampa Bay Rays' future looks really uncertain, and we tell you about our initial thoughts on The Electric State, the new thriller, sci-fi thriller movie. Maybe that's how you categorize it, on Netflix. Coming up here on the show. Let's go.
I'm gonna tell you a story about a girl who loves gin. A national pandemic seized her birthday celebration. Although she knew it was coming, we tried not to tell her. She brewed some Irish breakfast. Did she knew her birthday was getting corona?
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Powell Not Found podcast here for the week of Sunday, March 16th, 2025. Hopefully, everybody's having a good weekend. Go ahead and subscribe to the show on YouTube and rate and review us on all those podcast apps that you can find. It will help the show grow. But let's get into it straight away. Last week, we talked extensively about Gerrit Cole, supposed alleged injury to his elbow. No one knew last week what the severity of the elbow injury was. They knew he wasn't bouncing back. It looked like it was a repeat of last year. And we took you through all the details of what happened last year and what they sent him to a doctor for a review. He was out for 2 months, and he came back and he pitched somewhat successfully on what looked like an elbow that was facing end of days. And this year we get 2 spring training starts in. He gets rocked up a little bit. He gets knocked out in the first inning, back in the third inning, and Gerrit Cole starts talking about some intense pain in his elbow. And whenever there's intense pain in an elbow, that means one thing's coming. It means you're getting a visit to the old elbow doctor, Dr. Elatrosh. And when Dr. Elatrosh comes a knocking in Major League Baseball, you know that you're going to get Tommy John surgery. And that's exactly what happened with Gerrit Cole. Gerrit Cole is out, went under the knife, and is out until ideally, probably the 2026 season. They said they announced on social media that he went through a full UCL surgery with an internal brace. Not quite sure what that means in terms of what kind of Tommy John surgery this is, or whether the recovery is longer. I'm not exactly an expert when it comes to elbow injuries or elbow surgeries, so I'm just going to leave it up to we're probably not going to see Gerrit Cole until mid 2026, which is a huge blow to this season before it even begins. And the Yankees have not really responded. It appears the Yankees will probably try to figure out a solution in-house. All of these moves we told you last week start to make a lot more sense. Going out and getting Max Fried makes a whole lot more sense now if you knew that there was trouble coming. Gerrit Cole opting out. We said we speculated last week that Gerrit Cole opted out, but maybe knew something was going to be up with his shoulder, maybe didn't want to test the market with his shoulder and opted back in. And everybody said, that's funky, especially with Scott Boras as your agent. But now, looking back, hindsight's 2020, all of a sudden these puzzle pieces start to make a little bit more sense, right? Maybe the Yankees did have a little bit of lead time in terms of knowing that this injury might rear its ugly head again, and it certainly did. It really changed the complexion of the Yankees rotation going into 2025. I mean, they had 3 pretty great starters right off the bat in Cole, Fried in the addition, and a Carlos Rodon that was coming off a pretty impressive season, especially compared to his first season in Pinstripes, which was miserable and just ended miserably, and it did not yield any good results. But last year, coming off of a rebound season, it was exciting to see those top 3 in the Yankee rotation, each one with a different look. And with Clarke Schmidt, Luis Gil, Marcus Stroman being the odd man out, Suddenly, the Yankees go from having a lot of depth to no depth at all in the starting rotation as Luis Gil goes down, as we talked about last week, and Gerrit Cole is out for an extended period of time. It really made me think about what Gerrit Cole and what Aaron Judge has really mean to the team and how much the Yankees are dependent on those two guys to really form and forge their identity. A couple years ago in 2022, when Aaron Judge was out, right? Or it was 2023? Whenever Judge had the, it was 2023, excuse me. When Judge had the toe injury, when he went into the wall in Dodger Stadium and hurt his toe, and he was out, you could see how lost the Yankees were without that big bat in the lineup, right? And Gerrit Cole took the team on its back. He won a Cy Young that season, but he really heralded the Yankees into a successful season. But it was still noticeable that he was gone. In this case, you're losing a starter for 30 starts, right? You know, Gerrit Cole's not going to play every single day. He's a starting pitcher, but still, those 30 starts, you got to make it up somehow. So when Luis Gil went down, you plugged in Marcus Stroman, right? Not the greatest, but you didn't know what you were going to get from Gil last year. Gil was a gift. But now that Gerrit Cole goes down, you push up Max Fried. Carlos Rodon has been named the number 1 starter, so you're probably going to have Rodon, then Fried, then Stroman. That's probably how it's going to go. But who are you plugging in right now? Who do the Yankees have? What choices do the Yankees have to rebound from such a big loss like this? Now, in prior Yankee teams, I don't want to constantly live in the past, but in prior Yankee teams, if a starter went down, if Pettit went down, if Wells went down, if Cone went down, there was usually other people that were around that rotation that were formidable, if not as good. But Gerrit Cole kind of represents an old type of pitcher that is hard to find and is kind of reminiscent of the past, right? He is that old school starter that wants to go 9 innings. He's that old school starter that is gunning for 7 at least. He's the old school starter that gets mad if you tried to pull him out. I don't know if everybody remembers when Cole was facing Houston a couple years ago, after he was signed with the Yankees. It was like a redemption game. Boone tried to take him out in the 9th inning, and he was like yelling to stay in there, a la Mike Mussina and Joe Torre when that whole incident happened, when Mike Mussina barked back at Joe Torre to get into the dugout because he wanted to finish the game. There are not many options left like that on the market or even in baseball. So you could kind of excuse the dramatic pause that a lot of Yankee fans had as Gerrit Cole is now going to be out for the season and potentially out for half of the season of next year. It's a formidable and long period of time to be out. Teams' identities and teams' reliance on players move on very, very quickly. And so by the time Cole gets back, what kind of Yankees team are we looking at here? Are we looking at a Yankees team that is going to rebound in 2025 and win 94, 95 games, get into the playoffs, drive hard in October, even without their ace? Or are we looking at a 2025 that is over before it even begins, which is depressing? I don't believe that would happen with the New York Yankees. I just don't believe they have that mentality to just call it a quits if one person goes down. And if you're building a team that is so dependent on one person, and if it all falls apart like a house of cards, then you're not building your team correctly. Already we're starting to see candidates in spring training. I know spring training doesn't mean too much in the grand scheme of things because people are trying things out. People are testing things. They're tweaking their stance. They're tweaking their delivery. They're trying to work on things if not just break the major league team. But we're already seeing, like, who's that guy who's throwing triple digits in spring training? Lagrange? Is that his name? That's coming out of the Yankee camp. It's time for the Yankees to start calling up some of these pitchers and depth pieces from AAA, maybe before they're ready to do so. The Yankees have a long development period for some of their players. Let it be known that Aaron Judge came up when he was 25. I think that's when he broke the bigs, right? And Aaron Judge, again, expectedly was unexpected for his size, and it was unexpected that he had that kind of ability. I don't think anybody saw it really coming. And he broke late. But players like Spencer Jones, Everson Pereira, who's been down in the minor leagues just toiling away, get them up, right? Especially the pitchers. If you're not going to go out and grab somebody now, and there is a rationale to why you wouldn't want to do something too quickly. You don't know if you're going to run into a Luis Heel situation as you did last year. So you don't want to be too trigger happy. But if you're not going to go grab somebody, you got to be pulling out all the stops and seeing what you got. Because, hey, if Cole didn't go down last year, Luis Heel wouldn't be the commodity that he is today. Right? He wouldn't be the phenom that he was in the first half, because there wouldn't have been a slot for him. He would have been a bullpen piece at best playing for the Yanks. So bring him up. See what they got. Let's see how it works. And so as the Yankees were dealing with that, the bad news came today of, I guess when it rains, it pours, that another piece of the actual rotation here is starting to break down, I guess is the thing you're going to say. Let me see if I can get this framed up in the screen here. All right, let me push it here. There we go. From Brian Hoke today at 3:50 p.m., March 16th, Clarke Schmidt will not start tomorrow against the Blue Jays. Aaron Boone said Schmidt is dealing with shoulder soreness and is, quote, not getting all the way back to how he normally would. Oh, boy. Clarke Schmidt. Not great, right? We're losing pitchers left and right, and the Yankees seem to have a huge injury problem every single year. They can't stay healthy. In fact, the only year they did stay healthy was last year, and they did pretty well. They got to the World Series because they stayed healthy, with the exception of Gerrit Cole going out early. And they were able to kind of push their way through the American League and through October, but that doesn't bode very well. Clarke Schmidt was dealing with an achy back. So if he's out for an extended period of time, you've got three pitchers, and you better hope that others fill in the gap. I think what you're going to see this season and in the beginning of the season is the Yankees filling in a lot of those gaps with bullpen games. They are going to take a chapter from the Rays playbook and really try to fill in as much as they can, and maybe at the expense of their bullpen being essentially wasted at the end of the season. They had a lot of luck last year picking up other pieces, like Tim Hill was a perfect example, released by the White Sox, and they picked him up, and it filled in a gap of when their bullpen pieces went down. But if there's not going to be a starter that's going to be readily available, or if no one's going to step up, I think that's the only choice that they have outside of going to grab a starting pitcher that's on the market. A lot of people have been saying Sandy Alcantara from the Marlins. The Marlins seem to be a very, very agreeable trade partner with the Yankees. They seem to always offer something up to them. And so that name has been thrown around. He is like a great pitcher in the league. seems to fit what the Yankees need in terms of making up those numbers that they're going to lose. He's no Cole replacement, but man, is it close? It gives you that threat in your rotation that you really need, but maybe the expense is too high. I personally, when Cole went down, I thought this is a perfect opportunity to bring Michael King back from the Padres. Remember, we traded Michael King and Kyle Higashioka to the Padres for Juan Soto last year, knowing that was a big price to give because Michael King was getting developed as a good starter after being just a fantastic bullpen piece and setup man for the Yankees. And now he did pretty well with the Padres last year, and the Padres are starting to sell off pieces, so why not bring him back in a spot where you desperately need someone like that? This week, Brian Cashman actually did kind of speak to some of those comments about what they would do and whether they would seek outside help in order to fill in this gap that Cole has left. So let's take a listen to what he said here. This is from the Yes Network, and it's an interview with Meredith Markovitz. So let's play that here.
Not just Gerrit Cole, obviously, former Cy Young winner, huge blow, ace of your staff, but also Luis Gil. How do you piece it together now moving forward?
No, that's the job. I mean, you certainly hope you can avoid injuries, but injuries are also part of this, and that's why, again, like a Carrasco's a non-roster invite. He's an example of many players you try to invite to camp. I think we had a little bit more difficulty this winter trying to get people to come because we looked like we were so deep starting rotation-wise, so they non-roster invites were looking for opportunities, so they would like, no, I don't see how I can crack that staff. Well, I think if they had a chance to redo it, they'd look at our situation now and be like, oh, we're all in. So we'll evaluate, again, what we have here. Warren's pitched extremely well so far. Obviously, Carrasco's pitched extremely well so far. We'll also evaluate what's available outside of camp. But losing, obviously, Cole, losing Brubaker with the two fractured ribs. Hampton was, a depth piece that obviously was a chest piece moved off the board last year for injuries, and then the elbow reoccurred this year. So now he's down with Tommy John. So yeah, our starting rotation depth is definitely taking a hit.
Look, just 2.5 weeks about until the
starting rotation has definitely taken a hit. Not the thing you want to hear your general manager say right before the season starts, but that's the sad reality of the situation, right? The injury bug has plagued the Yankees for years and for seasons. And this is something that seems to be pretty common with pitchers. I mean, he says later in that very interview, that you never really know when Tommy John's gonna strike, right? Everyone's one pitch away. I think that was the quote that he said in that interview, which is a scary thing to think about. It also makes you kind of think contractually, why are they giving long contracts to these guys? Right? If you know that you're going to miss a season and a half, when they give out these 9-year, 8-year, 12-year contracts to these pitchers, are they just assuming that, hey, there's probably going to be 2 seasons where you're going to be gone? And that's not really fiscally responsible, is it? It's just unfortunate. It's unfortunate that they have to kind of go through this thing in the very beginning of the season. It's not the best situation for the Yankees at all. But with all these things, we are only a couple days away from the Major League Baseball season. The Dodgers and the Cubs are going to be starting the Tokyo series. They're going to play 2 games in the Tokyo Dome. Those games are on at a whopping 6 a.m. So for anybody who wants to watch the opening day of baseball, don't worry. Set your alarms because you're not going to be... if you don't, you're definitely going to miss it. 6 a.m, 6:10, the first pitch happens, and yeah, it's going to be a doozy for those. I know baseball has been trying to go global for a while. They've had games pretty much everywhere at this point. Mexico, England, the Dominican Republic, Japan last year, South Korea. They've been doing it pretty much everywhere. And so this year, obviously the logical choice is the Dodgers, especially with Shohei Ohtani and Yamamoto and Roki Sasaki. That why not showcase those guys, where they're from in Japan? It makes perfect sense. It just makes for a very, very difficult viewing experience. And if you're a sports fan, as I am, staying up last night until midnight to 2:30 in the morning to watch an Australian F1 race as F1 kicks off, and then having in the same week Major League Baseball 6:10 in the morning, I got to tell you, it makes you really, really hope that sports don't go more global, because dealing with this time zone thing really, really stinks. But should be an interesting couple games. And then they go back into spring training, which has got to be a mental, really mentally hard to get over that hump of like, now you're in a game that matters. Now you're just in exhibition mode again. It's something that they still have not really figured out. I know they need the week to transition between time zones so that you don't have one team asleep, but maybe shifting these games, these global games, to like the All-Star break maybe make more sense. Get rid of the All-Star game and do these global games instead. You might have more time to recover. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it's the best plan. And I honestly think everybody's marketing opening day as March 27th. There are games on the 18th. So whatever kind of global push that they're pushing, I'm sure it's working over there. It seems like Japan's very excited about it, but it doesn't seem like it's resonating over here. And maybe because I'm saddled on the East Coast and, the Dodgers and the Cubs, it's not going to play with me in terms of, I'm not staying up and watching those games. Maybe I'll get up. I'm not sure. I'm just talking out loud here. But when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the Tampa Bay Rays situation coming up on the show, and we'll talk about the movie The Electric State coming up next on the podcast. We'll see you right after the break. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Powell Not Found podcast here for the week of March 16th. Go ahead and find us at the YouTube channel. That's up YouTube at Powell Not Found, and go ahead and find us anywhere where podcasts are served. And you can go ahead and rate and review the show if you would like, and it will help kind of spread the awareness of the show. We are on our 57th episode, which is hard to kind of believe, but 57 have come and gone, and hopefully you've watched at least one of them and enjoyed it. I guess that's the other qualifier that's really important. The Rays, more bad news for Tampa as the Rays decide to pull out of the new ballpark in Tampa Bay. Last year, we were served the bad news after Hurricane Milton kind of came sweeping through Tampa, that destructive hurricane, and we saw the kind of vivid pictures of that drone video that was kind of going around showing everybody how much damage had actually occurred to Tropicana Field. It essentially ripped the roof off of the Thunderdome, or Tropicana Field as it's more commonly known as, leaving the Rays ballpark flooded, leaving the Rays ballpark damaged, and forcing them to seek an alternative home. And last year, the Yankees kind of stepped in, more specifically, Hal Steinbrenner stepped in and said to the Rays, you can use George Steinbrenner Field as a temporary ballpark for 1 year. And he was pretty clear that the agreement was for 1 year. He even reiterated when the Yankees decided to have no beards this year that it was, again, for 1 year. and didn't really leave the door open for a second year. More news has kind of come out saying that the Tropicana Field, the roof is going to get fixed. And later on that year, earlier, before Hurricane Milton happened in October, the Rays had been negotiating with Tampa Bay about a new ballpark, and even kind of went as far as to release renderings of what these new ballpark would look like. And if you're looking at the video version of the podcast right now, I'm trying to show you some of these renderings that they released. And you know what? It looked like a pretty nice 3D rendering of a beautifully and probably very expensive to build new ballpark, but definitely a ballpark that the Rays desperately, and let me reiterate, desperately need. The Rays have been living in Tropicana Field essentially since 1998 when they were introduced as an expansion team along with the Arizona Diamondbacks. They were the two teams. It was ballpark in Tampa and a ballpark in Arizona. They both celebrated 25 years fairly recently. And of those two expansion teams, I mean, one could look at really the numbers alone and just say that the Arizona Diamondbacks definitely had a better track record, right? Chase Field is a very beautiful field. I know they're trying to get a new ballpark built, but Chase Field is a formidable and nice place to take in a ball game still to this day. And the Tampa Bay Rays had kind of been treated as kind of like the ugly stepsister for a long time, right? Remember those first couple seasons that the Tampa Bay Rays were in the league? I mean, Wade Boggs was on a team. Jose Canseco was on a team. It just felt like everybody's free agent leftovers were on those expansion teams. And for years, the Rays were kind of a team that the Yankees and the rest of the AL East, the Red Sox, the Jays, and even the Orioles would just beat up, right? Just completely step on and inflate their standings because they weren't a formidable team. And as the years went on, specifically until about 2007, 2008, the Rays kind of became a redemption story, right? The Rays became, under especially Kevin Cash, the Rays became kind of like a second coming of Moneyball. How can you build a team that can take players in the beginnings of their career, not overspend, and still become successful? I mean, the Rays were a thorn for the last 10 years in the Yankees side, right? The Yankees have taken pages from the Rays playbook. I mean, really the introduction of like all this heavy shifting and these bullpen games and the 6-man rotation, all this stuff comes from the Rays, right? Being creative and trying to figure out a way to win with a payroll that is pennies compared to others. And with all this success, they've delivered themselves 2 pennants. I think that's correct. 2008. And I'm forgetting when the last time the Rays went to the World Series, but I believe it's 2 pennants, right? Just recently. I can't remember. 2021? No, I gotta remember. Anyway, somebody send off in the comments or tell me in the comments about what the second pennant is. I'm pretty sure they got to 2. No World Series rings, of course, but they were. I think it stunned the world in 2008 when they played the Phillies in the World Series. That was that rained out World Series, if you remember. There was a game that was like stopped and suspended due to rain in Philadelphia. The Rays, though, with all of their success, still traveled with one of the worst ballparks ever in Tropicana Field. This is an AstroTurf nightmare. Apparently, it's turf that injures people. I know a lot of people get toe turf on that field. The Yankees have complained that their players don't play. If you notice that every single time the Yankees play the Rays, Aaron Judge is DHing. They do not want that man out in the field when it comes to Tropicana Field. And they've and it's just ugly. Everybody who's gone to the actual field comes back with the same general sentiment that the place is a dump. The place should be renovated. The place should be completely redone. And despite their best efforts, When this proposal came along a couple years ago, this seemed like finally the Rays were going in the right direction. The Rays were finally going to build the ballpark that was going to be representative of their fan base. And it seemed like the team was on board. And more importantly, the city was on board. A lot of times when these people start, when everybody starts getting kind of stadium happy, they forget the city has to be on board, right? The city is going to utilize some of its money, right, to build some of these ballparks. So getting the city on board and getting the people of the city on board is the most important part. We'll see if Oakland gets to Las Vegas. That is still up in the air, right? And so it appears, according to all the articles, that St. Petersburg was on board with these plans. And then you see this statement come out of Stu Sternberg, who owns the Rays, Thursday morning, releasing this statement saying, from the Tampa Bay Rays, in gratitude for the continued support for our fans and community. And he writes the following, and let me push it to the screen here. Opening day is right around the corner, and we are eager and prepared for what promises to be an exciting and fun season of baseball. Thanks to our dedicated staff and players, our fans will experience the game in one of the most intimate settings in modern baseball history. And so the reason he's saying this is because George Steinbrenner Field, it's a spring training facility. It doesn't hold that many people. So if it doesn't hold a lot of people, it's all of a sudden intimate. It's a close-up action. I'm sure that, the Coyotes, the Arizona Coyotes probably felt the same thing when they were playing at Arizona State or wherever they were playing, when they didn't have a facility. And now where are they? Utah. As we all recover, also before I move on to the quote, Arizona, the Arizona Coyotes, the NHL, they also released renderings of a new stadium and we covered on this show very, very early. It was a beautiful new stadium. It's going to be in Phoenix, and Phoenix was not on board. And where are the Coyotes now? They are the Utah Hockey Club. So Rays and Tampa Bay, take note of what this is. This is clearly a note with an agenda, right? As we all recover from impacts from the hurricanes, we are incredibly grateful for the support from our fans and the wider Tampa Bay community. We are especially appreciative of how our corporate partners have stepped up during this challenging time for our organization. After careful deliberation, we have concluded we cannot move forward with the new ballpark and development project at this moment. A series of events beginning in October that no one could have anticipated led to this difficult decision. Our commitment to the vitality and success of the Rays organization is unwavering. We continue to focus on finding a ballpark solution that serves the best interests of our region, Major League Baseball, and our organization. The city of St. Petersburg is currently advancing plans to restore Tropicana Field for the 2026 season. We are thankful for their efforts and are excited to return to our home field next spring. Stuart Sternberg, Tampa Bay Rays, principal owner. Now, if the city seems like it's backing you for a new ballpark, and you decide out of the blue right before opening day to say, we're not going to move forward with the ballpark. Now, a number of things could happen, right? Cost could happen. Maybe location wasn't agreed upon. But if you decide to pull the plug without real negotiation, and it seems like the city of Tampa is kind of caught off guard. Even the governor of Florida even released, said at a press conference, they don't want to see Tampa Bay leave. They want the baseball to stay in the state of Florida. Plus, it serves a market that, people from Tampa are not going to drive down to Miami to see a baseball game. And they're certainly not going to drive up to Atlanta to see a baseball game. It serves a market down there. Why would you be doing this? My thought, and that's my thought and my opinion alone, they don't want this ballpark in Tampa. They have 25 years of data to show you that people didn't show up to that ballpark, that people didn't attend games, that it's hard to build a new stadium, right? Because once you're building a new stadium, you're essentially pressure to stay for 25 to 30 years. I think they see this as an opportunity to get them a new franchise, just like how the Athletics decided to not move forward with a new stadium. They stayed in that horrible morass of a stadium for years, more years than they needed to, and now they're in Sacramento. So whether or not this actually comes to pass, what I would be predicting that in 5 to 6 years, I don't think you're going to see the Tampa Bay Rays anymore in Tampa Bay. One, you can't have a Major League Baseball continue to play in that dump for years to come. Also, next year, we're going to have 2 Major League Baseball teams that are playing in less than Major League facilities. And going to see a Tampa Bay Rays game next year in George Steinbrenner Field, you better believe that they're going to sell those tickets at a premium experience, whatever premium might mean to the Tampa Bay market. But in 5 years, you're not going to see this team in Tampa Bay anymore. You're just not going to see it. You're not going to see it. It's not going to be there. So when we come back, we will talk a little bit about the new Netflix movie, The Electric State, and then we'll wrap up the show. And we'll talk a little bit more about the F1 season and Drive to Survive a little bit at the top of the next break. But let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Powell Not Found podcast. We are talking a couple more subjects here. I don't know if you did see Drive to Survive dropped this week with a new season. I'm actually kind of intrigued to see what that new season is going to talk about. I watched the first couple episodes. First episode talked about Christian Horner's whole kind of scandal in the beginning of last season and how Red Bull was dealing with it. And then also a kind of an expose on Lando Norris's situation winning a race for the first time in 2024 with McLaren and his partnership with Oscar Piastri. So very curious to see how they're going to stitch that kind of F1 soap opera together. It's perfect timing for that show every single year because they drop that show right as the F1 season begins. And it was an exciting, slick, troublesome race in Australia. Debuted at midnight here in the United States, went to about 2:30. Lando Norris ended up winning that race, Verstappen, and then Russell finishing out the podium there for him. Driving in the rain and driving an F1 car in the rain seems like it is the most terrifying experience you can have, right? I went to the F1 experience not too long ago that they have over in Washington, D.C., just to try it because they've been it's via the F1 arcade. And my experience just with that low level, I'm assuming it's a lower level rookie simulation that at least I had it on, that I'm sure you can get it more complex and maybe more one-to-one with what a car is, but I played on the most rookie level, right? And my experience coming out of that F1 arcade was, one, I should never touch an F1 car, right? Two, man, that is terrifying to see the limited visibility you have while you're looking at the road, plus you're looking through a halo on top of you. Now, to do this in the rain, no less, at hundreds of miles per hour and not spin out and just hope to God that the traction of the car holds up is just amazing. It's just a wonder to see and remarkable that more people don't spin out, more people don't crash I really got a feel for the new kid on Haas, Hodge. I can't even pronounce his name. Isaac. He spun out even in the formation lap. They weren't even going that fast, and it was that slick in that track. It's amazing to see. Also, F1 killing it when it comes to release and all of the stuff that they're doing. A new trailer just dropped for the F1 movie, and it appears, if you haven't seen it, go ahead and look at it. It's F1 had the F1 the movie, which is being produced by Jerry Bruckheimer and Lewis Hamilton, starring Brad Pitt. It seems like it's going to be kind of this team battle, team rival kind of thing, almost like an Alonso versus Stroll situation, or a Leclerc and Hamilton as you have in Ferrari right now, or even Lewis and George from last year, where it's like old guy versus new guy, the has-been versus the new up-and-comer. It seems like it's a pretty good movie. It's interesting. It's dropping in June, and a new trailer dropped. Go ahead and look at the trailer. It's really interesting. I'm curious to see what they brought to the actual production of that movie that makes you feel like you're in the cockpit. Because after Drive to Survive, you really do feel like you're in the cockpit. Like, there is some footage that they capture, which is beautiful, beyond beautiful. So what they're going to do to this movie to bring you into the cockpit, to bring you through the speed, to make you feel how difficult this thing is and how real it's going to be, is going to be interesting. Lewis Hamilton's talked extensively about this F1 movie, about how they brought Brad Pitt into the sport itself, just to not only do takes of the movie, but just to feel the experience and make it more true. You can actually see Brad Pitt like walking in the background of certain interviews of post-race. If you look closely enough of last year's footage, you're like, oh, there's Brad Pitt in the white jumpsuit. So I'm really excited for this movie. It's definitely going to be one that I'm going to pre-order a ticket for and see. And obviously we're going to review it on the show because it is amazing. But there was a really slick race. Go check it out. I question why they wouldn't delay a race like this in the rain. I know that F1 is kind of like football in a way where they're going to play through anything. But, when you're racing in that kind of wet conditions, are you really seeing who's got truly the pace? Are you really seeing who's truly fastest on the grid? Because there's so many other factors that come into it. Right? Does it jeopardize the race? I say it with football all the time. Like, if you're playing through the snow, are you really seeing who's the best of the best? Right? If you're introducing this third element to the sport. But other people disagree. But with that, let's talk about our last topic of the day, which is the movie, The Electric State. The Electric State is very interesting to me. I want 2 hours of my life back. Not because the movie's bad, but because the movie was not what I was expecting. It was a very, very corny movie. It has elements of familiar movies that I've seen in the past. It's directed by the Russo Brothers and stars Chris Pratt and Millie Bobby Brown, who you might know from Stranger Things, on Netflix as Eleven. That was like her breakout role. And she's been in other things, Enola Holmes and all that kind of stuff. But she stars here opposite of Chris Pratt, and they are in a post-apocalyptic world in which robots and humans try to live and coexist with each other. Robots ended up evolving and developing thoughts, which kind of caused a war between robots and humans. And it wasn't until a scientist who's played by Stanley Tucci, Stanley Tucci of Stanley Tucci Eats, who plays a scientist who basically can beat back the robots, and they've imprisoned them, and now humans are kind of living in this post-apocalyptic world, but they have these simulators that they put in their head in order to simulate whatever they want, a la kind of the Star Trek holodeck, or a la Wall-E at the end of Wall-E, when they're all have these computers on their head or virtual reality machines so that they can lose themselves in the simulation. Millie Bobby Brown's character, Michelle, loses her brother and her family in the war, and until she's approached by a robot who seems to be inhabiting her brother, and leads her on an adventure to eventually recover her brother from the hands of the evil scientist. This is a very, very... it's a premise that reminds me a little bit of movies like Starship Troopers or movies like iRobot. It reminds me of video games like Fallout. I would argue that this would be very, very interesting to watch had we not already been inundated by things like this in other types of mediums or other types of genres or whatever, or other movies like this before. This would have struck a different chord had we not seen this played out a number of times over and over and over again. It's a very familiar plot, and it's not exactly, and I don't want to criticize anybody, but it's not acted very particularly well. It just seems kind of like they're kind of running through the motions. Nothing's really earned. Even in their most like highly stressed environment, they still feel like they're still playing this kind of comedic play with each other. And the Russo brothers, if you don't know, they've directed the Captain America movies, they've directed the Avengers movies, which are very quippy in their own right, and they keep a very uplifting and humoristic tone throughout the movie, no matter what the situation, even if the situation is bad, right? Like Captain America and Iron Man are always up for a good laugh, even though the world's ending at all times. In this movie, they try to emulate that a lot, and it kind of falls flat. Visually, it's very, very interesting and very, very true to the source material. The source material is based on a 2018 book by Simon Stålenhag. And I guess it's in Sweden, it seems like. And so I looked up on their website, on the author's website, and you can see some of these stills, which I assume is from the graphic novel, and I'll push here to the video version of the podcast. Again, you can find that at YouTube at Powell Not Found, and you're listening to the Powell Not Found podcast. The artwork is really, really vivid and really, really beautifully done. It almost kind of looks like a watercolor if you're looking at it in the right way. It's so photoreal, some of his artwork. And they did a great job capturing that artwork and bringing it to life, because if you look at some of these stills before you watch the movie, you're going to be amazed at what they took from the page and they put up on screen. The sad part about this movie, though, is some of the moments, even though visually it's spectacular, and they do a great job creating and making this world believable, they don't earn your emotional investment in any of these characters, because one, there's a lot of characters that come at you at the same time. And also, it seems like the movie can't decide whether it wants to be a full comedy or a full drama. It's trapped somewhere in the middle. The movie starts off with like a very, very heavy exposition. That's a beautiful shot, isn't it? Wow, that's great. The movie starts with a very, very heavy, an exposition-heavy narrative that's kind of done with news clips a la Starship Troopers, where you're caught up on the world just using the news stuff. And you start seeing these characters like Mr. Peanut from Planters Peanut, living in this world without any proper context of what the heck's going on. You start realizing it and you don't know whether this is a joke. So you have a hard time grabbing hold of the tone of the movie about whether you're supposed to be laughing or playing along, because right before that moment in the movie, there's a very serious drama, almost like made for TV drama about the two main characters, the sister and the brother's a genius and whether he should go to college or not. So you don't know what you're watching. They're trying to inject very truthful, wholesome, and emotional investment into this film that is just hard to get emotionally invested with these characters because of their ridiculousness on the screen compared to some of the human characters. So they just don't earn it. And so when the movie eventually turns emotional towards the end, and when it really takes that turn into you're supposed to feel something welling up, you don't feel anything inside because you're just kind of along for a theme park ride here with this movie. It's not particularly acted very well. Again, what we mentioned before, the performances are kind of phoned in a little bit. Even the most emotional moments don't really get you. A lot of notable names are in this. Giancarlo Esposito, Woody Harrelson, Hank Azaria is very noticeable in this movie as one of the characters that if you've watched any Simpsons episode in the past like 20 years, you're going to know it's Hank Azaria just due to his voice. So a lot of star power in this movie. Woody Harrelson does a great job. It's actually kind of interesting seeing this movie right off of Last Breath and seeing how his characters have changed a little bit, but that voice is very, very recognizable at this point. Giancarlo Esposito plays the antagonist and one of the antagonists along with Stanley Tucci in this movie, and maybe this is just a PSA for Giancarlo Esposito. Somebody put Giancarlo Esposito in a movie where he's not playing the villain. I mean, he has played so many villains, and he is a scary and well-acted villain. I mean, Gus Fring from Breaking Bad, Moff Gideon from what's it called, The Mandalorian, the guy from Captain America that we just saw, the first villain. Somebody put that man in a role where he's amicable. He needs it for his repertoire. He seems like a delightful man. He deserves more than being the villain in every Hollywood movie. This is the hill that I'm going to die on, and this is what I want for Giancarlo Esposito. He's a good actor. Don't typecast him anymore. He deserves more, people. He deserves more. So, there are, but he plays a pretty good villain in this movie, and he does a pretty good job. It's something we've seen before. I think some of these things too, like it's really impressive visually, but and the emotions that they can actually portray through these 3D renders are fascinating. You know, I didn't think that I was going to end my night watching the emotional deliberation of the Mr. Peanut guy, of the Planters Peanut guy, but they do such a good job with these renders that you do. And it's worth it just to watch the 3D renders of these things because they're wild. I mean, there is one moment where the Planters Peanut guy is running into battle and yelling a war cry, and I really think the movie is worth just to watch, just for that visual alone. So, again, not the greatest movie. They do set it up for eventual sequels just in case this takes off, but it doesn't seem like it's getting favorable reviews. And to me, it just reminds me too much of something we've seen before and reminds me of kind of a Netflix tendency where there seems to be a movie with a lot of star power that's a thriller, but it just never gets off the ground. What was that one with Ryan Reynolds and The Rock? Wasn't there like he versus he kind of movie, or spy versus spy kind of movie with them. Like, was it Red? Was it Red? I think it was called Red, or Red Notice. Was that it? I think it was that called, where it seems like it's the same thing, but it's just set in a different kind of world, and it's visually spectacular. So, again, that's The Electric State on Netflix. It debuted March 14th, directed by the Russo Brothers, which stars Millie Bobby Brown of Stranger Things and Enola Holmes fame, and Chris Pratt, who's doing his best non-Guardians of the Galaxy, like impression in this movie. There's actually a pretty good soundtrack in this movie too. Like they kind of punctuate it almost like Guardians of the Galaxy, where they have this idea for kind of punctuating the movie with this kind of classic, timeless soundtrack. I mean, even the trailer is set to Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which kind of makes you think, like, is this, this film has that kind of like, he versus them kind of cast kind of thing going on, as the Wizard of Oz does. But it wants to be Guardians of the Galaxy, but it just doesn't have as much charm or charisma as the other ones to kind of achieve that for this film. So, again, that's The Electric State. You can watch it on Netflix, starring Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt. And with that, we are going to go ahead and wrap up the show. Again, this has been the Powell Not Found podcast, episode 57. Go ahead and subscribe to the show and rate and review the show on any kind of podcast app you can find, and leave a comment. And we'll see you next week, and we'll talk more about some of the other things that are upcoming in our purview, in our world, which is definitely going to be those 2 games that start the Major League Baseball season and then stops the Major League Baseball season in Tokyo. We'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll talk about anything else that hits on the show next week. Have a good week, guys. Bye.
Once